to another edition of Heart Chronicles with myself, Miss Amber B. and
Minister Tasha.
As you all know, we have been talking about one of those topics that's kind of a hush-hush topic. It's defining boundaries. So if you were unable to tune in for the first two episodes, we're going to kind of bring you up to speed just so you have a better understanding of what's been discussed and some of the interesting things that we've kind of concluded with. So, Minister Tasha, can you kind of give them a brief overview of where we started out a couple weeks ago?
Yes, well, we started on last week, a few episodes ago with defining what a boundary is, and we determined that setting a boundary is basically creating a defining line, whether that's someone creating a defining line for you or you creating a defining line for someone else, as well as you creating a defining line for yourself. We also discussed the areas that we need to create boundaries, which would be our family, our parents, our friends, co-workers, anyone that you have a relationship with. That doesn't relationship doesn't necessarily mean a friendship, but any kind of relationship, whether it's a working relationship, a personal relationship, a friendship. And we also discussed, healthy as well as unhealthy boundaries. Healthy meaning the ones that you can say without being offensive, and then there were the unhealthy ones, the ones that were basically created when we were younger that we didn't know were unhealthy.
Yes. So as you all can see, we're kind of just giving you a brief overview, as we said, of the defining boundary topics that we discussed in the prior two episodes. So we had an opportunity to do a survey of 100 women just to kind of get their input on what their thoughts were as it relates to boundaries. And we're going to go ahead and share some of those survey results because they are very interesting, to say the least. So the first one is, do you think boundaries are necessary? And 100% of the women agree that boundaries are necessary. And I don't know about you, Minister Tasha, but what that says to me is that as women, we know what a boundary is. Now, whether or not we define it,
I think that's the hard part.
Whether or not we make others follow suit into our boundaries, that's probably where the disconnect
that's more challenging.
Yes. Absolutely. The second question is, do you find it challenging to set boundaries? And 31% of the individuals said that yes is the answer.
It is challenging. I think at one point in life for me, I think when I was younger, maybe more like in my 30s, it was more challenging for me. But the older I get, it's becoming just a little bit easier. I'm not saying that all areas aren't challenging still, but it's a little easier than it was when I was younger.
So I guess my thoughts as it relates to, as I've grown in the area of defining boundaries, there have always been certain boundaries that I've been very clear on.
Yes.
One being my personal space. I've been very clear on my boundaries. But as I've gotten older, I think my boundaries are kind of tightening up.
They are.
So the areas in which I was very just free-hearted about, I've kind of had to grab a little more control of those areas, just because I can kind of see the effect of not having a boundary in that area, to say the least.
I understand.
As a part of the survey question number 2, do you find it challenging to set boundaries? As we said, 31% of the individuals said yes, but 69% say no. They have no problem at all defining boundaries. Do you think that 69%?
69%.
So do you think that maybe fluctuates with the age of the individuals that took the survey?
Yes, most definitely it does. Again, I think the older that you get, the easier it becomes, because you're not so much into people pleasing as much anymore.
Absolutely.
And you feel like, I'm not going to let you do this to me or say this to me, as well as, again, I'm not going to allow you to cause me to react a certain kind of way. I think that goes both ways. You learn more self-control when you're older. You learn more patience when you're older. So I think those are some of the boundaries that we set as we get a little older. Just like you talked on the last episode, you're not going to talk to me any kind of way. When we were younger, we probably thought that was cute for someone to do that. As you get older, you understand, no, that's a form of disrespect.
You know what I find interesting? Just in having conversations with many of my girlfriends, I've discovered that as we've gotten older, the area where we couldn't define boundaries as a child, we can define them now as an adult, and that's with our parents.
I would agree 100%.
And I know that sounds almost as if you're trying to not necessarily boss your parents, but you've come into a space in your life where you kind of have to say to yourself, okay, Mom is invading a little too much. Mom is trying to tell me how to run my house. Mom is trying to tell me how to raise my children.
Right.
So as a child, you couldn't say, oh, she is always in my business. But as an adult, you can define this boundary now with someone that you couldn't. How does that make you feel when you think about that? Or have you had to do that?
Oh, yes, I have. Oh, yes, I have. Because I think for a while, one of my parents, my father, I think he still views us as his little girls. You know, and I'm like 40 something now, so the advice that he gives is very sound, but it's how he gives it. It makes me like, okay, Daddy, I'm grown now.
I get it now.
And then even with my mom, like learning me as an adult, and then still respecting her as my mother, that was kind of different because you're used to little Tasha. And now this new adult Tasha has evolved into someone, I'm not going to say completely different, but for the most part, I'm different than I was at 15, and of course you should be.
Yes.
So it is learning how to say what you need to say, and then even too learning the setting the boundary for yourself, that you understand that you can't share everything with them because they are your parents, and there are certain things that they're going to say based upon them being your parents that you may not necessarily like, or they don't understand the full scope of what's going on with you. So you get kind of offended because they're coming from their space as a parent who's protective, and you're coming from, I wanted a sounding board only.
That's good. That's good. Oh, this is interesting. I'm always interested to hear about the different boundaries and just the different ways that people approach boundaries.
Yes.
I can recall going to a conference not too long ago, and one of the speakers at the conference was doing a parenting class.
Okay.
And she talked about boundaries and how to set boundaries as a parent. And she used a plunger as a plunger as the description. I know that sounds...
Really?
Yes. And what she said is, she turned it upside down. She said, this outside ring of this plunger, she said, as wide as it is, she said, this is the amount of space that we give children. We don't give them boundaries in their early stages. And then as they grow up, we kind of try to come together and tighten it up the steam.
You're on to something. You just made me think about something. Do you think as a parent, I don't have any children, so do you think as a parent that is because when we were growing up, we couldn't really have a voice or have a choice? And so basically you're kind of living vicariously through them, or not wanting them to go through what you went through, so you kind of change the name of the game when they're younger and allow them to make choices and have a voice, and it basically kind of ends up, I'm not going to say backfiring, but
you hit the nail on the head, because that's exactly what it is. We do have this fear that, well, I don't want to give my child too many boundaries because there were a lot of things that I thought I should have been able to do as a child, and I didn't get to do them.
Right. And
maybe I would have been a better person. Not realizing that not putting those boundaries in place for our children, this is my experience right now. I now see the benefit of, I should have tightened up on the front end. And that's what the individual at the conference was trying to say, that as children or babies and toddlers, you need to start with the small end.
That's right.
And as they show their responsibility and respect for your boundaries, then you begin to expand.
That's good.
At the end of the funnel, or the plumber that she used. So I just thought that was an excellent example to use as it relates to defining boundaries. And I almost feel like sometimes as adults we use that same mindset that same concept as it relates to our relationships, be it a relationship with a man and a woman, or relationships with friends. We are so freely open and, oh yes, you can do anything. And then when things start
and say anything
to look in a manner in which we don't like them,
right,
we want to start tightening up when we really should have made others respect the boundaries that we had and seen that they could respect them first. And if we wanted to give leeway, then we slowly expand and open up that area, because they've earned our trust and they've earned our respect.
Right. So that goes to the boundary of whether you trust sooner or not, because some people trust immediately, others you have to work for it.
Yes, you were right.
based on life's experiences.
Yes. So let's go on to question number 3. Are you receptive to the boundaries of others?
I think this answer is kind of amazing because sending it out, the survey out to over 100 women, and to get a response of 100% yes.
I'm going to have to say I disagree. I think someone did not tell the truth.
That's what I was
To
saying.
our listening audience, we love you all. We love our
Yes, we
listeners.
do.
But I don't think everyone is being honest because we are human.
We are, and some things
Are offensive
They
when
are
somebody
offensive.
sets
They're
a
not
boundary
okay.
to us.
Yes.
Absolutely. If you tell me, if I am in a situation where, I feel like, oh, I'm just, we're good friends, so I can do what I want, I come over, and then she stops me one day and says, no, you can't just open my refrigerator. I'm going to be a little offended because I'm like,
I've
well,
been
I thought
doing
we
this.
had a different relationship.
Yes.
So to say that you never get offended to our survey takers, I'm not sure
Never.
everybody understood the question or
to say
you
you're
were
receptive.
truly honest about it. Yeah, to
You're
receptive
to
is
say
to mean
you're
you
receptive
received it well.
as soon as they say it. Now, sometimes it may take a little time, because of course you're a little, like you said, taken back. Like, wait a minute, and then once you think about it, a little time goes on. You're like, oh, okay, they didn't quite mean it like that. I took that wrong. But again, 100%, ladies.
100% ladies.
Come on.
I don't know. I think maybe next time we probably should
Be a little more detailed.
in our
Yes,
survey.
that was our fault.
Yes.
That was our fault.
So let's go on to question number 4. Did defining boundaries change any of your relationships?
Whoa.
And this one, we have 80% said yes, and 20% said no.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that defining boundaries changes relationships?
So just in response, response that we received to that question, it automatically contradicts the question we just had.
The one before?
Because if the question is, did it change any of your relationships? Yes. That means somebody was not receptive to the boundary.
Well, wait. Maybe they were. And maybe their boundary was, that doesn't work for me.
That is possible. That is very much possible.
And that's where the change took place. Like, you know what? I'm not going for that. So if that's how you are and that's your line, that's fine. We good for saying, I'm just going to do me.
Yes. Quickly. Very quickly.
And it doesn't take much. I'm just going to do me.
Yes.
So I think that's part of why relationships change. Then I think the other thing is, I think once whatever is communicated, whether it's you defining a boundary or whether it's you not responding how they thought you were going to respond or them defining their boundary, I think there's a lack of communication in there. So that's where it changes, because now I don't know how to be, you don't know how to be, because we didn't really discuss the boundary and what that looked like.
Foundation and what it looked like. So do you have any situations that you don't mind sharing where you had to define a boundary and maybe it changed a relationship or changed the culture between you and an individual?
As a single Christian woman in the dating world, absolutely.
I could see that. I could see
Absolutely.
that. I could see
And for
that.
so many reasons. Number one, being a Christian. Then number two, you find out, oh, she's a minister. There's that line. So I'm saying not only with man and woman, but also even in some of my friendships, because now there are some things that Tasha can't do that.
So how does that make you feel? Because you have your faith and you have, hey, I am a Christian woman. I'm saved. I'm saving myself. So in having that boundary for yourself, how does that feel when others don't receive it in the manner that you want them to? Because you want people to be receptive and you want them to respectfully receive your boundaries. How does it feel if someone does not respectfully receive it?
Well, here's what I would say to them.
We always have something to say.
Here's what I would say to them. You have daughters, don't you? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, what would you tell your daughters?
That's a great answer.
And their answer would be, well, I would tell them to wait, don't give it up. And I'm like,
Same goes over here.
Same thing. I'm somebody's daughter. Twice.
Yes, she is.
Exactly.
Yes, she is.
So with that being said, that automatically set the boundary on where our relationship could go, though. So that friend zoned just about everybody, literally, except for one.
Interesting. I know I've had a situation where I've had to define some boundaries, and it kind of affected a relationship or two, and that's okay. I had an individual that came into my home. It was family. But one day they were there and I was not there. And when I came, which I didn't have a problem with.
Okay.
But when I came home, they were laid across my bed.
Whose bed?
There are only two people that can lay
bed?
across my bed, and that is my husband and myself. And they were laid across my bed, and that immediately took me to a place that I didn't like.
How did you handle that?
So,
let me ask this first. So is the relationship between you and this person like normally really, really, really cool?
it was up until that point,
Okay.
and we're still cool, but it's more of a tiptoe, like, let me double check with Amber before I do that, because I don't want her to get offended. I don't want to step out of place. So it did change the relationship of them understanding that her personal space, be very careful on how you walk. But it did not change the relationship in its totality,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, total.
But I think
So you changed the way you.
So it changed the way
changed the dynamics, the way you interact. We don't interact quite the same, but we still interact.
Yes.
I understand.
Yes. And that let me know then, because that was the first time I ever had to address that type of situation.
I think I
because
would have
that's
been
my personal space.
I would have just stood. I think I would have been standing there like
I was standing there
processing. Is this happening?
That's exactly what I was doing. Like, how do I respond to this? Because
So were you calm?
I was initially calm because I was in a great mood when I got home. But I think it just overall, it caught me off guard because that's just not a normal situation you walk into. You know, there are some situations, like you said, you're in the dating world. You already know there are some people that are not going to be receptive
Right.
of your stance and your
Right.
faith and where you
Right.
stand. Not every day will you walk in, somebody's laid across your bed. That's not a normal.
this is true.
Some people never encounter that. So
This
it was
is true.
a different situation.
This is true.
To say the least. But I think overall the situation is, we're good now. So let's go on to the question number 5. Do you hold yourself accountable for the boundaries you set for yourself? Tell the truth, Tasha.
Do I hold myself accountable? Yes, because I think I'm harder on myself than I am on other people. And so if I feel like I didn't, or I let that person slide, okay, I'm a hairstylist. So there are some things that, people pull on your heartstrings when they sit in your chair, and so then there's this boundary of pricing, and then there's your heart, and sometimes that's a war. And so it's hard to set the boundary of business is business and personal is personal. So that was challenging for me for a long time. And I had to learn to hold myself accountable, because what would happen is, in the end, who would suffer? Me. Even though you can't be God-given, I understand that. But he doesn't want us to be fools either.
Absolutely. Pastor speaks about that a lot.
Exactly. So that was one of the things that I really had to work on, holding myself accountable for. And I still kind of hit and miss it sometimes. Just kind of depends on what's going on with the person. If they, because sometimes their situations really are, you like, oh, man.
I really don't want to charge you $150.
I don't want to charge you $150. I know you said you're going through cancer and everything, and you're going through these treatments, and man, oh Lord. Okay, so you ready? It's gonna be $150. Sometimes you feel like, just give me $75.
I hear that comment a lot when I speak with individuals that are business owners and entrepreneurs. They struggle in that area.
I think that's our hardest part.
Because people will try to make you feel like that because you are a Christian and because you are saved, you automatically are not supposed to have a boundary and make me be held accountable to the same standards as everybody else. You should have leniency in every area.
Amber, listen.
And I have, and me as an individual that is trying to become an entrepreneur, that is probably one of the most recurring pieces of advice that I hear.
Set your boundary in the beginning.
Yeah.
Set it in the beginning, because once, like you said, once it's relaxed, it's hard to get reins on that again. And then when you do start to do it, people looking at you crazy like, oh, who she thinks she is? She thinks she better than, or, they think you're becoming arrogant, and it's not that. They don't realize that I have to eat too. or let's say you do a price increase. You get a raise on your job. I haven't had a raise in the past 5 years, so this little $5, really?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I have a model now when I'm dealing with business owners, and I tell my husband all the time, it costs what it costs.
It does.
And if this is not the arena that you can stand in,
that's right.
go to an arena that you
Because
can pay for.
there's someone else.
There is always someone else who will do it for a different price.
That's it.
Be it more quality, better quality, less quality, but it costs what it costs. And I think it's unfair to barter someone's cost because you feel like, well, I have a connection with you, so your boundaries should be a little different for me.
So, so you're onto something. Do you think that it's easier as a business owner yourself? Do you think it'll be easier for you to let me give you the discount? Don't you just expect one?
Yes.
It's easier when I set the boundary.
Yes.
Than when I allow you to try to make one.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I would agree.
And holding yourself accountable for, for the boundaries that you set for yourself, that's a very hard boundary to set because, like you said, it does tug on your heart. Mm-hmm. And as it relates to just defining boundaries that we too adhere to, mm-hmm. I think it's just a struggle in and of itself because we do allow our heart to get too involved. Mm-hmm. And I think if we take the emotions out of the equation for every boundary that we set and look at it as more of a standard, like these are my standards. It's nothing personal, but this is just my standard. I think we could probably be more comfortable with setting those boundaries and respecting them, as it says, holding myself accountable to this boundary because this is just my standard. My quality, for example, you're a hairstylist, as you said. My quality of work is what allows me to charge the fee that I charge.
That's right.
It's nothing personal.
My quality and
there's someone that will do it for $25
all day long.
But this is a different quality of standard over here. So for my standards, for my products, for my service, for my time, this is the boundary line I've set for my price. Yes. And if you don't want it, that's okay. I love you anyway.
And again, that's learned.
It is learned.
That's learned, especially when you come from here to here and you like thinking, oh man, they're gonna walk out the door. And especially like in the beginning when I first started out doing hair in a salon, it was just like, what if I let this money walk out the door? I didn't understand that just because they left, God's gonna send you 3 more.
Yes, He will, every time.
Every time.
Every time. So let's go on. We only have one more question left. And this one is, do you feel liberated after setting your boundaries? And the response to that, 80% said yes, 21% said no.
Said no.
Let's talk about the 21% that said no. Why do you think it is that they do not feel liberated, that they don't feel free?
Because when you initially set the boundary, I'm going to speak from experience. That's not your first response. Your first response for me was fear, like
guilt.
Fear, guilt.
Yeah.
Did I say that right? Man. Did I offend them? Your mind, especially being women, we're emotional.
Why do we feel guilty about telling people giving people our truth? Why as individuals, and I've always struggled with that, why are we uncomfortable with being honest with ourselves to other people?
It's that mask, honey. You got to keep the mask. You got to keep that mask on at all times. You got to keep it on. And so it's hard to, you want me to take my makeup off? Are you kidding me? You got to see these blemishes under here? And the person may not even have very many, but because they've conditioned themselves to wear this mask, I have to look the part at all times. So how dare you even think that I don't have it together? How dare you think that? How dare you?
So many of us.
How dare you think that I get offended and I cry in the car sometimes?
Oh, so many of us. That is our story. That is our story, and we don't feel liberated because we're scared of the unknown, the fear of not knowing what our boundaries will bring us.
That's it.
Will your boundary leave you lonely because you said it? Will it leave you manless? Will it leave you friendless?
Friendless, yes, familyless.
Yes.
And that's hard. And I do believe that once it's said that liberation does come, like I said, that's just an initial reaction or response. But once, you sleep on it for a day or two, then liberation does come, because you're like, you know what, I'm glad I got that off my chest. I don't have to carry that anymore. At least I said it. What they do with it is up to them. And I hope, and pray that they didn't take it wrong, or that I didn't say it offensively. And I hope they know that I came from a pure place and not this mean place.
Yes.
And if a person knows you, they'll pretty much know where you're coming from.
But it's still a difficult spot to be in.
It is.
So for those, like I said, 21% said no, they do not feel liberated. For the 80%
That said
of
yes.
individuals that say yes,
They walk a little more stout.
more power to you, to our
Yes.
listeners, because that says that you are confident in your choices.
Yes.
You're confident in who you are, and you do not mind letting anyone know what your standards are. So I respect your choices there.
Yes.
So, it's defining boundaries. It's just one of those topics. I think that as children, if we could teach our children growing up, I know if I would have learned a bit more about how to define boundaries and being okay with setting those boundaries, I probably could have navigated myself out of a lot of hurtful situations, be it in the dating world, in the friendship world, on my job, because I set boundaries in the beginning, and I don't know if we're always taught that growing up, like you said, and we've talked about in the last few episodes, where we're always told, be quiet, you don't need to speak, hey, you don't hush, this your child.
So you have to learn to use your voice.
Yes.
And know that it's okay to use your voice as an adult.
Yes, you're absolutely correct there. So in closing, we kind of want to make sure that everybody understands boundaries are okay.
Yes.
They are okay, and we've got a couple of boundaries that we think every listener should kind of take with them and kind of study in and sink in on what we're saying, because I think it not only helps you in your personal life, I think it helps you with your friendships,
Yes, any relationship.
on your job. So we'll just kind of go down the list. We've got 7 boundaries that we believe are boundaries that you can live by to make your life better, make it feel more whole and complete. As you all know, 7 is the number of completion.
Yes, it is.
So, number 1, when a boundary is crossed, never react, but always respond.
Always respond. And
Always
there is a
respond.
difference.
There is a difference.
difference.
Because a reaction makes you function out of emotion.
Right.
A response allows you to be wise in your communication
Yes.
to the individual that
Yes.
you're defining the boundary to. So I think that works. Number 2, only engage in relationships with people that show love and reciprocate respect and trust.
That's awesome. Because, a lot of times we do, even growing up with our friends, we don't think about that because we think it's the norm, but it's not.
Yeah.
And it's okay for it not to be.
Yeah.
You need to know that you deserve love, respect, and trust.
Yes. Go ahead, Tosh, for number 3.
Live in your truth. Whoa, not the image that has been painted by others. Live in your truth. If this is how you are, this is how you feel, you have to be okay with exactly who you are, no matter what that looks like, no matter if it does appear to be offensive to others, because sometimes we dummy ourselves down.
Yes.
Just to appease others, to make them feel better about their insecurities or their accomplishments or whatever it is. We put ourselves in a place that isn't healthy for us.
Yes.
So living your truth.
Right. We'll kind of go ahead and go through these last few pretty quickly. Respect your time, because it's only your time to plan out.
Yes.
Don't let others control your time.
No, at all.
I know you know that.
Oh, yes. Had to learn it, but yes.
Saying no is okay is number 5, even if it isn't okay for others to hear. Your no is fine. It may not be fine to others, but as long as it's fine with you, it's good.
That's it.
Number 6, your mental health is your first priority, because if you lose it, you lose you. Protect it at all costs, because it eliminates stress in every area
Yes,
of
it
your
does.
life. And last but not least, be confident enough to walk away from some things and some people. It's called valuing self.
I think this is good stuff. It's good stuff. Yes, learning to set boundaries for yourself, within yourself, and others setting boundaries with you. Relationships. That's what it is.
So we would like to thank you all for tuning in with us on our episode of Heart Chronicles. As we talked about defining boundaries, we've had a wonderful time discussing this. If you have any questions, feel free to give us a call or send us a shout out on Facebook. We look forward to seeing you all soon. Thanks.